Hello everyone, welcome to our knowledge lesson today. Let's take a look at our timeline for our Fighting for Our Cause unit. So far we've talked about two very special women in American history. We've talked about Susan B. Anthony, who fought for the right for women to vote and for the rights of enslaved people. And we talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, who fought for human and civil rights. Now, when we talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, we talked about a woman that worked with her briefly. We only talked about her a little bit, but her name was Mary McLeod Bethune. Today we're going to learn a lot more about Miss Mary McLeod Bethune. She is also an important woman in American history. She, like Susan B. Anthony, was a school teacher. The cause that she fought for was she helped African American children, particularly African American girls. We'll talk about how she did that today, but first we need to do our vocabulary words. Proud. Proud means feeling great honor or a sense of satisfaction. Noah was very proud of the model volcano that he had made. Tell whoever's helping you today about a time that you felt proud of an achievement. Use the word proud while you talk about it with them. Privilege. A privilege is an honor or advantage that one person might have that sets him or her apart in some way. I have had the privilege of meeting 12 American presidents, said the Queen of England. Society. Society is a community of people who live together and share many of the same life experiences. The invention of the steam train changed the way Midwestern society functioned. Scholarship. A scholarship is money or an opportunity given to a student to study for little or no cost. Tay studied very hard in high school and earned a full scholarship that paid for his college education. Healthcare. Healthcare is medical care that is provided to people. Countries around the world have different ways of providing healthcare to their citizens. Mary Jane McLeod was born a long time ago in 1875 in South Carolina on her parents' small farm. Mary's parents had 17 children. Mary was the 15th child. Mary was the only member of her family to go to school and receive an education. Her brothers and sisters were needed to work on the family farm. However, it wasn't an easy thing for Mary to go to school. She walked about 5 miles to school each day, and then she walked home again. Mary didn't mind. Going to school was a privilege that few African American children had, especially girls. Mary was an excellent student. She learned easily and quickly. Mary would race home each day to teach her brothers and sisters the things she had learned at school. Mary also taught her neighbors' children. Mary's family was so proud of her. When Mary was 13 years of age, she received a scholarship to study at a school for African American girls. The school was called Scotia Seminary in North Carolina. Mary's mother was so proud of her. She made her a special dress so that Mary would look nice when she went to her new school. Mary was sad to leave her family, and they were sad to see her go, but everyone knew that Mary was going to do wonderful things with her life. After attending Scotia Seminary, Mary received another scholarship, this time to a school in Chicago. After graduating, Mary returned to South Carolina to become a teacher at the school she had once attended. Mary was determined to educate young African American children. and no one was going to stop her. After several years of being a teacher, Mary decided to start a school of her own. She especially wanted to teach African American girls, as many still did not receive an education. Mary had heard about a town in Florida called Daytona Beach. A new railroad was being built there, and many of the workers were African American men. The workers' families lived in camps. Their children did not go to school, and the men earned just about enough money to feed their families. Mary saw this as a great opportunity and came up with a plan. With just $1.50 in her pocket, Mary moved to Daytona Beach, Florida, and opened her own school for African American girls. A kind woman offered Mary a place to live. A friend helped her find an empty house that later became the new school. Old broken furniture was fixed. Boxes and packing crates from local stores became desks and chairs. And in the autumn of 1904, Mary opened her own school. In the beginning, there were just 6 students, including Mary's own son. Gradually, more and more students came. Each girl paid 50 cents a week for tuition. Mary taught them cooking and sewing, as well as reading, writing, and math. There was never enough money, so Mary baked pies and cookies to sell. Not everyone liked what Mary was doing. One night while Mary was at school, all the streetlights went out. When Mary looked out onto the street, she saw a group of people gathered together. They intended to scare Mary in the hope that she would close her school and leave town. Mary would not be bullied. As the group of people stood in a pool of light, Mary and the frightened girls watched and sang songs. Before long, the people scattered. 3 years later, Mary moved her school to a new location, a 32-acre farm with 14 buildings. The 400 students at the school grew their own food. Mary was very proud of what she had achieved. Later, Mary's school joined with a school for African American boys and eventually became the Bethune Cookman University. Mary's school started with 5 young African American girls and her son. It eventually became a 4-year university with over 1,000 students that still exists today. Mary became the president of the school. However, Mary wasn't quite finished. There was more work to be done. Mary opened up her own hospital. Many African Americans received treatment in Mary's hospital. In addition to promoting education and health care, Mary joined forces with various groups who were campaigning for the right for women to vote. As you have already discovered, in the early 1900s, women could not vote. During this time, African American men did have the right to vote, but they weren't always able to. In order to vote, men had to be able to read and write. Mary held classes at night so that African American men who had not had the opportunity to go to school could learn these skills and therefore be able to vote. Because she believed all people had the right to an education and to have books to read, Mary opened up a library that provided free reading material to anyone who wanted it. Mary was doing amazing things. Once again, people tried to scare her away. They did not like what she was doing. Mary ignored them and continued her work. Mary always believed in the power of education. "The whole world opened to me when I learned to read," she once said. Mary's efforts had not gone unnoticed. 3 U.S. presidents asked Mary for advice. President Coolidge invited her to attend his child welfare conference. President Hoover asked her to head up the White House Conference on Child Health, and President Roosevelt named her as Special Advisor on Minority Affairs. Who did we learn about that was married to President Roosevelt? Eleanor Roosevelt, who also worked with Mary. Why do you think so many presidents asked Mary for advice? Mary also became a founder and the first president of the National Council of Negro Women. For many years, Mary worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt. Mary became director of the Division of Negro Affairs and of the National Youth Administration. She was the first African American woman to become head of a federal agency or organization. The word federal refers to a central government that has far-reaching powers. Mary wanted all African Americans to become fully involved in the American society. Mary received many honors for her work. She received the Spingarn Medal for her efforts in educating African Americans. This medal is given each year by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People to an African American. As you have already heard, Mary was part of a group of advisors known as the Black Cabinet. Mary herself asked President Roosevelt to choose more talented African Americans for important jobs. In 2008, the United States elected an African American president. Without people like Mary, it's possible that this might never have happened. Mary McLeod Bethune died on May 18, 1955. On July 10, 1974, 99 years to the day after Mary's birthday, a statue of Mary was placed in Lincoln Park in Washington, D.C. Mary was the first woman and the first African American to be honored in this way. A portrait of Mary hangs in the state capitol of South Carolina, a great honor for a woman who fought against discrimination and worked tirelessly for young African Americans. In our story today, we heard this sentence. As the group of people stood in a pool of light, Mary and the frightened girls watched and sang songs. Here, the word pool means a small area of light or liquid. Pool has a couple of other definitions. It can mean a large structure that is filled with water and that is used for swimming. We can see this in picture 2. Pool can also mean a game in which players use a long stick and a white ball to hit colorful balls into pockets around the table. We can see this definition in picture 3. All right, my friends, I have got some questions for you about what we read today. In our read aloud, we talked about how Mary considered going to school, being able to attend school, to be a privilege. Why did she think that was such a privilege? Going to school was a privilege for Mary because at the time when she was alive, many African American children, especially African American girls, were not allowed to go to school. Remember, she lived in a time during United States history when not everyone was treated equally, and African American people, or people with darker skin, were still being treated unfairly. So it was a huge privilege for her to be able to go to school because most African American girls would not be able to. When Mary was 13 years old, something special happened to her. What was it? when she was 13 years old, she received a scholarship that allowed her to go to school. In addition, what she did when she helped fight for her cause, is she opened up a school for African American girls. In addition to opening up the school for girls in Florida, what other institutions did Mary open there? So she opened her school for African American girls, and what else did she open? She opened up a hospital and a library. At the time when she was in the United States, it was very difficult for some African American men to be able to vote. Why was it difficult for them to vote? To vote, at this time, you had to prove that you could read and write. But were African American boys allowed to go to school usually? No. So they did not have the opportunity to learn to read and write. And because they could not read and write, they were not allowed to vote. Mary fought to solve this problem. What did she do to solve this problem? She taught them to read and write. She taught classes at night for them so that they could learn. All right, I want you to turn to whoever is with you today, whoever's helping you, and I want you to ask them a question about what we learned. I want you to ask them a question that starts with the word what. See if you can think of a question that starts with the word what to ask whoever's helping you today. If they can answer it, that's great. If they can't answer it, then you get to be the teacher and you get to answer it for them and explain it to them. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that, my friends. All right, my friends, we are going to add Mary McLeod Bethune's picture to our timeline. She worked with Eleanor Roosevelt, but she started her work, she opened up her school and started her work helping African American people before Eleanor Roosevelt got involved. So we're going to put her picture, she was almost the same time as Eleanor Roosevelt, but she had a little bit of a head start. So I'm going to put her just slightly to the side, so she's slightly before. So we've got Abraham Lincoln and Susan B. Anthony, and then Mary McLeod Bethune, and then Eleanor Roosevelt just slightly after her. Today we are going to write another free verse poem, this one about Mary McLeod Bethune and the work that she did to help African American people during a time in the United States history when they were not being treated fairly. I will go over our free verse poem and our planning guide on my computer so you can see it. I'm going to have you pull up the PDF that's attached to this assignment so you can follow along with me. We know that practice makes perfect, and the more you practice or try something, the better you will get. You guys are going to be experts at free verse poetry when we're done with this domain. Today we're going to write another free verse poem This one about Mary McLeod Bethune and all of her accomplishments. Again, we're going to want to turn this page on its side so we can fit all of our thoughts and ideas onto it better. I'm just going to zoom out again so we can see a little bit more. I need a text box in the very middle. That's going to be what our poem is about. Today our poem is going to be about Mary McLeod Bethune. We are going to take some time to fill in these bubbles around the edges with words or phrases that describe Mary McLeod Bethune or her accomplishments. There are a lot of different things that we could write in these bubbles. Let me fix her L. We need to capitalize the L in her name. There we go. Mary McLeod Bethune, I'm going to say that she was the only person in her family to get an education. Education, not education. There we go. She not only went and got an education, she also became a teacher and helped other African American children receive an education. Remember, at the time when Mary McLeod Bethune was alive, people who looked different were still not treated fairly. So many African American children did not have the privilege or the opportunity to attend school. To fix that, she opened a school for African American children. Remember, her school started pretty small, but it got very big, and eventually it became a university. So that is a college where adults go to learn. She not only opened a school, she also opened a hospital and a library. While she was teaching her school, while she was teaching children, she also taught classes to adults later at nighttime. This was because African American men had the right to vote, or they had suffrage, the right to vote at this time, but they had to be able to read and write in order to vote. And since many African American children couldn't attend school, many African American adult men could not read and write. So she opened a school to teach them so that they would be able to exercise their right to vote. Mary McLeod Bethune, I think, was a very strong woman. I think she was also very kind. To do all of these things for different people. I would also say that she was wise or smart. Remember, we talked about how many presidents sought her advice. So she was very knowledgeable and very intelligent, and many US presidents saw that and asked for her advice when making decisions. Go ahead and fill in that last bubble with something that you noticed about Mary McLeod Bethune in our lesson today. As we keep going on these, I'll do less and less for you for each one. I'll give you less ideas as we go. Today we'll practice with just one. If you have other ideas that are different from the ones I listed, that's fine too. You can copy some of mine if you would like, but if you have others that you would like to use, you are free to use those. When you have got a plan or lots of ideas about Mary McLeod Bethune and all of the wonderful things that she did, you'll be ready to jump down to our next page. Again, when we get to that second page, we'll want to come up to our hamburger menu and rotate it again. You may choose a title for your poem. I chose the name of who we learned about today. This is my poem that I used to write with my plan that I made. Yours will be different, obviously. Your plan might be a little bit different than mine, and your poem will probably be different than mine also. When you are finished with your poem and you've given it a title, go ahead and turn this one in, my friends, and you will be done with knowledge today. Remember that your poem does not have to be in complete sentences. You should use it can be, but you can use any combo of words or phrases to state your opinion on Mary McLeod Bethune and her accomplishments. I'm excited to read your poems, and I will see you guys next time.